Morning, everyone. I'm Nick Miller from QA Higher Education, Chief Commercial Officer. I'm joined by some of our partners this morning. We're going to be talking about the reality versus expectation and trying to demystify public-private partnerships. So we've brought some of our partners together. Thank you. They're going to introduce themselves and we're going to talk about the key areas of partnerships and how we get them to work. So as we go round, we're going to go Rob, Donal, Andrew round my screen. If you could introduce yourselves and tell us about your partnership with QA Higher Education.
Great, I'll kick off. Hi everybody, Rob Carthy. I'm the International Director at Northumbria University up in Newcastle. We've been working with QA since 2014. We've got 3 strands of the partnership. 2 are international, 1 is a domestic partnership. But the 2 international partnerships we have is a collaboration around our London campus. And then on campus here in Newcastle, QA run the Pathway College that we have. They've both been running since 2014, 2015, and London we're up to about 5,000 students, Pathway's up to about 500 students. And then that 3rd partnership we have, we collaborate on some degree apprenticeships that we run out of London as well.
Thanks, Rob. Donal?
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. My name is Donal O'Connor. I'm Director of Future Students at the University of South Wales. We've been working with QAHE since 2022, although it does feel like the partnership's been working longer than that. Of course, I was involved in the early stages setting it all up, so probably gives me that impression. But yeah, it's been a really positive partnership, really since day one. We're working on Pathway only at the moment, QAHE, and of course there's scope to develop that partnership further as we move forward. Rob's mentioned, managed campuses, etc. So one thing to note, I think, for working with a partner like QAHE is you can actually scope different types of partnerships as the partnership develops and matures.
Thanks, Donal. And Andrew?
Thanks, Nick. So my name's Andrew Bird. I'm Chief Marketing Officer for Solent University, Southampton. I think we've been working with QA for about 4 or 5 years, and we basically work with both in the international and domestic. So it's a bit similar to Northumbria. So internationally, we have an embedded college dealing with our pre-sessional English foundation years, international year 1, which is about to launch, and domestically we work with them both on franchise students across the network of QA areas and apprenticeships. And so very glad to be here today.
Thanks, everyone. What we're going to try and do today is talk about some broad topics, but also recognising the audience. We're going to try and give you some practical, detailed advice and examples for you to take back to your day jobs, either with your current partners or as you seek to explore new ones. So Donal, if we can come to you first. So in terms of implementing new partnerships and ensuring differentiation from other university partners that QA are working with, tell us about that.
Interesting one. I had the benefit of actually working in Pathway for 10 years before coming back into the public sector. And I knew from that experience that it was really critical when you were developing a new partner, a new university partner, to get as much agreed in advance of the launch, let's say. So we worked hard in that respect with QAHE, looking at entry criteria, for example, across the various markets. How do we cooperate to work with each other in the recruitment of students coming out of the various markets, the different levels of study that we put into the Pathway programme based on demand. I think in terms of differentiation, between the various partners, because of course, as we all know, QAHE has a number of UK partner universities. I think really the universities do a lot of that work for QAHE themselves. So obviously we have different locations, we'll have different products in terms of programs. There will be some crossover, obviously. But, when you're trying to differentiate yourself from, say, a similar post-92 university, which the University of South Wales is, we're looking at price points, maybe we're looking at scholarships, we have in-country specialism. So, for example, we would have in-country offices across various markets that are also good pathway markets. So we know that from those particular markets, there's a higher chance of getting good quality students through the pathway route. So really it's a case of ensuring that QAHE are well briefed on product, well briefed on the USPs, KSPs of the partner university, and they would take those messages into market like we would ourselves directly. So that's really a case of open communication, but trying to get as much done as possible from the off. Of course, the partnership develops, challenges arise, or maybe you want to introduce a new product, for example, a different year one, or maybe a pre-masters. So that's obviously discussions in development. But I guess my advice to anyone who wants to start a new partnership is try and get as much nailed as soon as possible before you go live.
Thanks, Donal. And moving to you, Rob, in terms of, we've embedded quite a large partnership, and the QA partnership is quite a prominent part of the university. Maybe you could talk to us about that.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. I think Northumbria has always been a very active international university, and we deliver about 6,000 students offshore through our T&E partnerships. So we're a university that's really comfortable and well versed in working in a franchise model, and that's our main delivery model. But when we started to look at having a London campus, it was really, really clear that what we had to do was try and make sure we weren't thinking in a franchise way. Try and make sure we were thinking about this in a different way, because if we just looked at London as we'll franchise our programs down there, then the relationship would be on an incorrect footing. So the way that we've tried to make sure that we think about London, internally is almost as a fifth faculty. So we've got four faculties. We treat London as a fifth faculty, up to and including having its own internal admin activities. We've got specific admissions support. We've even got a pro vice chancellor for London. So we treat it in a way that you put the structures around it in a way that you then want the university to see and understand what we do. So making sure that the organisation is clear that this is a long-term partnership. And it's been it's been a journey. It's fair to say. That wasn't the model we had on day one. That certainly probably wasn't in the model we had 5 years ago. But it's an iterative process, and it's an iterative process that takes us in a way that allows us to use London in the way that we want to use it, which is as our kind of probably a little bit more agile test bed for doing different things, for being a way of delivering programs in a way that we would maybe like to think about in Newcastle, but maybe would take us slightly longer to get through our normal channels and our normal processes. So let's say it's about positioning the way that we have the partnership within the university so that all aspects of the university understand it and treat it in the right way. So it's been like I say, it's been a journey, but I feel like we're in a really strong, really positive position now.
Thanks, Rob. And Andrew, recognising that that when we talk about new partnership, you may have inherited the QA partnerships, but you have lots of experience across other universities. Maybe you could talk to us about how this one is different or differentiated from what you've seen before.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Obviously, in one respect, it's very different because we're dealing with domestic students working with you guys, and that's a very strong point for us. Solent University is a relatively small institution with limited reach, and working with QA has really expanded that reach into other areas within the UK, and also other types of students. And we can talk about that a bit more later on, perhaps. But in that way, it's really allowed us to, while these students being Solent students and being taught the Solent way, working collaboratively with you, it's really moved our reach into different areas. And that's the same internationally. Obviously, Solent University has a relatively small international recruitment team. And again, working with QA, working with your sales guys, working with your supporting your agent network, as Donald and Robert said, making sure that you know and understand our key selling points and what makes Solent University, our program, slightly different to others, has helped us in terms of our reach. And obviously in these day and age, that helps me in terms of getting more out of my budgets, which is obviously really important, as we know with the situation we are in the sector right now.
Thanks, Andrew. And perhaps staying with you, Andrew, the next bit, really, we're going to go into the detail of marketing and recruitment practice to try and give some practical advice here. So if we could stay with you here, How are you working with QA and ensuring effective marketing and recruitment practice within the partnership?
Well, as you know, Nick, it's definitely a work in progress. I think there's still, Rob used the word iterative. You have to be continuously, looking at what you're doing, continuously communicating with each other to make sure that those barriers that do come up in place my university's processes change. We have to make sure that it aligns with you. We're not kicking the can down the road, and I think we have been. No, there have been issues, particularly for us at Solid, in terms of that. So, these sorts of things in terms of making sure that we're as aligned as possible. Obviously, you have different systems to us. You use a different CRM system than we do, but it doesn't mean that we still can't align what we need to do. So we still can't ensure that the marketing messages are consistent and correct. That the students still know and understand that those tip-off points and that transition is really, really important, that it's as smooth as possible, because from day one, while on the International Foundation program, obviously they are a QA student, they're also a Solent student, and they need to feel that they need to understand our culture, they need to understand what they're going to get when they move forwards. Otherwise, it's a very hard line that they hit, and then things change totally. They will change anyway because sizes of classes and stuff like that. But really, it's working together to ensure that that transition is as smooth as possible, and that those students feel embedded both within QA and the university at the earliest stage, and that's before they even enroll. That's when they're being recruited at the same time.
Thanks, Andrew. And switching across to you, Rob, I think Andrew talked there about branding and university requirements and things, and obviously there's a differentiated approach from QA in terms of white labeling and university brand led. Maybe you could talk to us about how some of the practicalities of that in terms of marketing and recruitment, because it's a complex area.
Yeah, and I think it was actually something that we'd given a lot of thought to when we were first looking at how we wanted a pathway college, because at that point there were lots of different foundation pathway type approaches, some of which were very much branded by the private company, some of which was based on licenses, etc. We were very clear that because we have a strong international brand, because we've always been a big international player, that what we wanted to be able to do was to white label this. We wanted a model where the student largely felt like a Northumbria student from day one. Yeah, we know that the making sure that the joins at the back are as seamless as possible is always going to be a lot of work, but it was just important to us that we were able to ensure that students felt like a Northumbria student, and therefore they weren't thinking they were coming to do a one-year program. This was start of their 4-year undergraduate route, basically, and that's something that we've stuck very closely to throughout. Where that becomes challenging and where it needs negotiation and a lot of work is out in market, because we work with agents, QA work with agents. We've got overlap in that, as you might imagine, and making sure that we have that consistency of approach between the Northumbria recruitment teams and the QA recruitment teams, and we've got the handoffs right. It is absolutely critical. And in some markets, there's little overlap, because actually the pathway recruitment and the recruitment that we're doing, to main campus is quite distinct. In other markets, it's absolutely kind of two kind of overlapping circles in a Venn diagram, and so that's where we have to spend a lot of time together agreeing how we're approaching the market, how we're approaching particular agents, and how we're approaching particular institutions. And that's, because we wanted to go down that white label route, it's then contingent that we do that. London's obviously slightly different because, again, I'll say slightly different. We want it to be a Northumbria London campus, and I think that from a brand and perspective, that's the accepted way of doing things. But again, it's then important to make sure that the student journey, understanding the key student journeys that we're going to be bringing students to campus, were understood, were mapped out, and the points of differentiation between what Northumbria were doing and what QA were doing were really important. And it's worth saying that when we first started, there was probably more domestic recruitment going through the London campus than there is now, and some of that's actually driven by changes in the EU funding. some of that changes in strategic decisions by the university and by QA, but it's flowed and ebbed quite a lot in terms of where we've recruited our students from and the types of students we've brought through. But for us, it was always really about making sure that one of the reasons for the partnership or the partnerships was about using QA's recruitment power to turbocharge through the Northumbria brand. And that was something that was really important to, I think, to both of us. We both saw a clear benefit through doing that, and I think that that stood us in really good stead.
Thanks, Rob. And I agree with all of that, and thanks for bringing to life the brand piece. In terms of and Donal, just coming over to you, if we could, perhaps talk about some of the more detailed compliance and technology initiatives that we've uncovered. I think that's highly insightful here. So yeah, over to you.
No, absolutely. Yeah. So I couldn't agree more with actually both points made by Andrew and Rob. Rob around white branding, it's critical. And Andrew's already referenced systems. Aligning systems, as anyone who's listening to this call will know, that's never that easy. Sometimes even internally. One thing I was really pleased with right from the off was that we both work with Enrollee and we both use Cashew. So I think that's just made talking to each other and managing the CAS process so much easier. Like, for example, I can log into Cashew right now and just switch from university to pathway and just see what's going on with the pathway partner. So that in itself is, from a practical perspective, that's obviously very helpful for our teams and admissions in particular. But from a strategic perspective, talking to exec, for example, that gives me good access to data. Should I be asked, what's the latest information on partnership, etc. The other benefit is really our approaches to certain markets. We have high risk markets, as you know. So if we need to say withdraw from XYZ places because of UKVI concerns around whatever, we can do that, and we have done that, and we'll continue to do that. So it's an open, frank conversation with each other as to where we operate, and if we do operate there, how we operate, the deposits we might take, etc. So yeah, I think the alignment around the systems and also being able to react quickly to circumstances. So the way we might react as a university, we always know that QAHE will just come along on the journey with us in that regard. And you may argue also that the pathway partner, it's really essential that they do that, because we're bringing in a student who's maybe younger, and who perhaps they come into a year zero or a foundation year, then there is perhaps a bit more pressure on that student to perform because they haven't perhaps reached that A-level standard. So it's really just a case of keeping a close eye on how things are working and just having frank and open conversations with the partner at all times. And to date, that's been excellent with QAHE.
Thanks, Donal. And changing direction up a level here. So in terms of like the long-term benefits and challenges that you see in the public-private partnership area based on your experiences. So, if we're looking at long-term growth, long-term partnerships that are beneficial, what are you seeing as the potential benefits and challenges in working with QA, for example? So if we could go to maybe you first, Andrew, that would be good.
Thanks, Nick. Obviously, one of the things is you can say shared risk. The flip side of that is shared reward.
Yeah.
Obviously, as I said, we're a relatively small institution when we can be quite agile in many respects. When we're talking about how we expand out into different markets, different products, we still, it does take a bit of time, as we know, for a regular undergraduate program, for example, from concept through to marketing through to enrollment, you're talking about almost 2 years in a normal process in terms of the academic integrity, getting them online, all those sorts of things. 2 years. I mean, as an example, as you know, Nick, you guys came to us with a concept in terms of providing Saturday, Sunday delivery for a bachelor degree in business based out of, I think, London. We agreed that within 3 months, and it's going to market within 9. So, you just wouldn't have that similar sort of way of working. While many universities are agile, but if you think about it, if we were to do that, we'd be recruiting different types of academics in a different space, finding different space in a different part of the country, marketing, recruiting, all those sorts of things, which, we're just not of that. Well, I defy any university who could do that within 9 months, setting up in a new space, working Saturdays, Sundays, thinking about your HR regulations, etc., etc., etc. Whereas with organisations such as QA, said within 9, we're ready to go to market, and you guys are starting to recruit from that. So those sorts of things. We have to be reactive to the needs of our sector, the needs of the markets. Working with QA, working with a private provider, gives us that bit more certainty that we can do it in a managed risk way, in a positive way. But that just helps us ensuring that we can actually move more quickly, while making sure that the core business we're doing on site doesn't lose that focus and that integrity also. So I think long term, it allows us to move with the waves of what the sector's looking for, and basically what our students are looking for, in a lot better fashion than many universities can do themselves, where we are still not constrained, because obviously, absolutely, we have to go through these processes. But universities are like the old saying, they're like tankers. They take a long time to turn, whereas that agility and that ability, based on market intelligence and research, working with private providers, really gives us that ability to move and swap and switch things as we go through.
Thanks, Andrew. Moving to you, Rob.
Yeah, I think I was chuckling at Andrew's use of the tanker analogy, because that was absolutely what was in my mind. Because it can be challenging. It can be there's a lot of work that goes into changes within universities. I think where we've seen the real benefit, if I think about I think firstly about London, I think there's a couple of bits. One is content and one is structure. So I mentioned earlier that we treat London as a fifth faculty. And what that means is that we can put different programs there. So we've got programs that we run in London, we don't run anywhere else. And what that's allowed us to do is to test and trial things in a way that would be really difficult elsewhere. And so one example of that would be running a luxury brand management masters in London. It's not a program we're really going to be in a position to run in Newcastle, because we don't have the right access in Newcastle to kind of luxury brand organisations in the way that you do in London. And the successful running of that in London allowed us to then bounce that into our Amsterdam campus as well. So that journey was driven by the ability to trial that program out in London. Similarly, we're also looking at trialing programs where we can reduce the English language requirement somewhat, whilst then bolstering credit-bearing English language. And that's not something we're able to do in Newcastle at the moment. We're going to test that and trial that in London. And because we're working on an intake by intake basis, it allows us to have very quick, rapid data analysis. So we can test and see what's working, see what's not, make sure we can put the right interventions in if things aren't working. And so that kind of test bed is really, really important. So there's a piece about the content, and there's also a piece just making sure that the if I think about pathway, it's the regular conversation around pathway about, are there other things we could be putting in here? And we've now got a situation where I think we've got 7 or 8 different routes through pathway. We've got pretty much every single undergraduate degree that can accept international students with a pathway route. This year we're launching nursing, for example. So the ability to move quickly, the ability to move with agility, and the ability to get meaningful, robust data from QA, because QA, with its network of partners, can say, this has worked here, this is how we're doing it with this partner. And it's reasonably anonymized, but it gives a different flavour of information that plays through into the university, which just helps university decision making as well. So some really, really interesting things that we've been able to do differently as a result of those 2 partnerships, in London and in Pathway.
Thanks, Rob. And obviously with the market turning more competitive than it has done for a while, those examples that Rob and Andrew have just given are highly topical and great examples from where I sit as well of really agile practice around this. So Donald, like coming to you, obviously we work with University of South Wales around Pathway, but maybe you could talk to us about your long-term long-term view, and especially having worked for a private provider yourself?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I'm quite envious of the development that Solent and Northumbria have worked with QAHC so quickly. I give you a good example of a conversation I had recently with one of your colleagues, Nick, around domestic recruitment. So my personal remit is domestic and international recruitment. So it's challenging on both fronts. There's no denying that. International law, that's everyone knows why. But domestic for South Wales, it is a hard task on occasion. So getting some extra help from the QA domestic recruitment team. Early stages, we have another conversation where we, go into it, have a deeper dive, if you like. But that's a real value add. Of course, having a campus in another part of the UK would be fantastic for both domestic and international recruitment. That's something that no doubt we'll be discussing sometime in the future. And we're not just limited to London. QAHC have you're managing campuses in Northwest as well, and the Midlands. So it's quite a widespread. So I think perhaps when you start working with, I guess it depends on your pathway partner, but with QAHC, I think there's a whole sort of toolkit of options that you can adopt if it's degree apprenticeships is another area of strength for QAHC. So it really depends on the ambition of the partner university. But I think that Rob and Andy both touched on it. It's the agility, how quickly you can move. I don't know if we'll ever have an agile super tanker, really Musk will develop one, who knows. But yeah, the universities don't move quickly. We all know that. So working with you and it's just a dream in many respects.
Thanks, Dale. Changing subject again. Obviously, none of these partnerships work without students and students having a great experience. They're the main customer, obviously, and it's critical that they have a good experience. So, how are you ensuring the student experience remains top notch as you're, franchising, partnering not just with QA but with other providers? Rob, if we could come to you first.
Yeah, as you say, Nick, it's not just a London or a pathway question. It's a question for us more widely. We do a lot of delivery in Newcastle, but we also do a lot of delivery outside of Newcastle, London. The overseas partnerships we have in lots of places, distance learning. How do you ensure that there is a consistent thread of Northumbria experience through that? And that's absolutely key. And that's a lot about the program design. What is intrinsic to a Northumbria degree that can be delivered wherever it needs to be delivered. But from a student experience perspective, there's, I guess, a few practical things that we do, with London and with Pathway. With London in particular, there's obviously, we make sure that we've got student union representatives, who are regularly engaging with the London cohorts, making sure we've got staff there, making sure we've got visibility. We ensure that the specialist staff that we have, especially around visas, welfare, immigration, are working across campuses and making sure that we're sharing that best practice. We run a model called Ask for Help, which is a single point of contact for all students, and that allows us to then triage in a particular way, and also, and that triaging process allows us to deal with London queries or with pathway queries as we need to, and so that still allows that Northumbria Ask for Help journey, but then with the right flavour and the right expertise and the right staffing. And so it's been a really good journey to make sure that we've got that training, that expertise, flowing in the right way. The other thing to think about as well, and I think Donald, you touched on this, is when you're running Pathway, we do end up with a lot of under 18s. And I don't say that, and that's great, because there are certain markets where students might be, just below 18 when they come and join us, and we've, traditionally had a lot of experience of that. Being up in the northeast, we used to receive a lot of Scottish students, and a lot of Scottish students would be starting with us, when they were 17. But it's always just making sure that you've got that expertise, you've got that additional focus to support those students with their particular needs, because you are acting in loco parentis, and it's incredibly important that you can provide assurances to parents that their child will be looked after well. And so the small class size, the attentiveness of the academic tutors, the real professionalism of the staff within the Pathway Centre is absolutely critical to that, and it's something we do well, and so it allows us to then engage confidently in those markets where you do get more students that who come to us age 17, for example.
Thanks, Rob. Andrew?
So thinking specifically about our international embedded pathways, our international foundation programs, which are on campus. We've touched on it before, is ensuring that those students really know that they are a part of the wider community from day one. And so that is from even from recruitment and inquiry stage. So those embedded students have full access to all of Solent's facilities, including academic and non-academic. So if they have an issue, they go to our student hub, and our support team will help support them in whatever that issue is. We can help them in terms of accommodation. We don't look at them as they're different, irrespective of whether they've got a QA lanyard, a QA Solent lanyard, or a Solent lanyard. They're still a Solent student from the very beginning and full access, and that's really important for us to make sure that they don't feel different. Being on campus, having access, as Rob said, to the student union, having access to those other experiences that are going on around the university, making sure that they're being invited to events, because they'll be on a different. How systems work, they'll be tagged slightly differently. So you have to make sure that everybody, when they know what's going on, that they're included and we feel inclusive. The good part also of having embedded is there's no excuses or reasons why our academic colleagues aren't in those classrooms. We're doing joint teaching, we're offering taster sessions, we're making sure that they're having full access and other parts of the university as well. So if they need the labs, for example, the labs, they're using our labs. And then when they come into year 1, year 2, year 3, they know where to go, they know what labs they are, they know the software system, so it's fully integrated, ensuring that we're not using different programs, we're not teaching in a different way. Again, that's really important. A university is a university, but each of us teaching, we have a different culture, we have a different tone. Academics teach in slightly different ways, and ensuring that is mirrored as much as possible across the two organizations, again, is really important. If we don't have huge class sizes of 400 or 500, which is great, but obviously neither do we with QA. So the students know what they're going to do, what they're going to get, the experience they're going to get, the type of teaching they're going to get, how the assessments are going to happen. We have joint academic boards between QA and the university, so the way they're being assessed and all those sorts of things also flows through, so that they get that best possible chance of succeeding and continuing on with their studies.
Thanks, Andrew. And Donal, anything to add to that? I mean, I know we've worked a lot.
Yeah, it's covered a lot there. The embedded CAS, of course, I think is important to note.
Yeah.
The vast majority of our students would be on that embedded CAS. There are a few exceptions. But yeah, the student experience is critical even from a partnership commercial perspective, if you like, because obviously a student has a good academic experience and personal experience. Even if a student does pass the pathway element, you're not guaranteed to retain that student necessarily. So if they do have that good experience and engagement with the faculty directly whilst they're a pathway student, then there's a better chance of them passing and then converting them to progress, which is obviously important.
Yeah, agreed. And from QA's point of view, we're working a lot in this area with all of the university partners, because the student experience through the pathway into the university is absolutely critical, and it's not a one-time fix, it's a constant improvement process, that one. So yeah. We're going to do 2 final questions. So before we come to the last question, we're probably going to go into a bit of detail here. So in terms of managing the partnership and responding to developments in the sector, of which there are obviously many and frequent at the moment, such as the development of the agent quality framework, could we just talk about that for a couple of minutes before we go to the final question? So Andrew, if we could maybe come to you. This is a very recent development. It's happened quickly. how are you working with QA in this, and what do you see as the benefit of having a private partner, perhaps in the context of something like this?
Yeah, so we obviously we're doing this before the election, so we don't know when this comes out who's going to be our happy leader when people are watching this. But no matter what, AQF's not going to go away. The MAC report was very clear in terms of that. The DFE, Home Office, UKVI, are fully on board with this. So irrespective of whether it's Conservative, Labour, Reform, whoever it is going to be the leader, AQF is here to stay. And as you said, it's very early in terms of our adoption. So obviously, the vast, if not every university, the major providers such as QA have all signed up for the pledge.
Yeah,
we're not all yet using it in anger, but we've always said that will take time. It will take a year, 2 years to fully embed universities. Looking at our contracts, looking at our complaints procedures with regards to potential students, all those sorts of things from the university aspect, and the QA aspect is a work in progress. For AQF to really succeed, we need the government more on board. We need the proper data from the UKVI. We need the name of the agent on the CASs. We need UCAS to step up and put agents onto application forms. All those sorts of things will help us. But in terms of the partnerships, really, again, this comes back to that having to work together. And again, this is a work in progress. We need to. I'm not saying we don't need to align our agents we work with, but we need to be consistent in our use of agents. We need to be open and transparent with each other in terms of, well, this agent isn't doing what they should be doing, and we let you guys know, you need to let us know. So that open conversations with private providers has to be really embedded to ensure that AQF works for both the university and the private provider. Because as Donald said, we also have embedded CASs. These students are on our CAS. So if your agents are messing up, which we haven't had any examples of that, that's our CAS. That's our risk that we're taking on this. So AQF is hugely important for us both to embed together, and for it to be successful, we really have to be really open and transparent with data, open and transparent with communications, open and transparent with our contracts, things like that. But there certainly is a way to go, whether that's with QA or any UK university. I would doubt if anybody's gone down the road enough to say on hand on heart, with a private provider, we're compliant on both sides. So this is something we need to be doing over the next 6 to 9 months for sure.
Thanks, Andrew. And obviously the AQF is one example of sort of sector developments at the moment. So perhaps going more broadly, let's go to you first, Rob. Going more broadly about sector developments, and how you work with QA. If you could maybe talk about that for a second.
Yeah, well, I think the sector is, it feels more challenging than it has done for a long time. Despite the retention of graduate route, which is great. I think the opportunities that we see through adjusting and evolving around sector developments via working with QA is, for us, is a lot of it's about kind of testing new markets. It's the ability to say, well, actually, if market X is looking challenging, how do we pivot out into market Y? And what do we need to do that? So we've been doing quite a lot of that, in recent times. And so, for example, we face some challenges in certain markets, whether that's about student performance, whether that's about kind of the ability of access to funds, whatever it needs to be. It's then just making sure we've got that open and transparent conversation that says, okay, if this country is proving challenging, what is almost the replacement market that we need to build out, and trying to be proactive in that. And so looking at markets where either neither of us are active, or the activity is very, very low, and just some of the basics, ensuring we understand who the agents are in the markets, ensuring we've got the right entry criteria nailed for all of the different points of entry. It's working that way. I think in the situation that we've seen, somewhere like Nigeria, just to use a specific example, for Nigeria, where we know we've seen that drastic devaluation in the naira, it's then been about making sure that the approval mechanisms are there so that we can support QA in their ability to adjust around pricing and making sure that the price point to students is right, or so whether that's about price point, whether that's about the deposit amount, just making sure that we've got that ability to flex and flex quickly so that we're then positioned in the right way in the market. And what's helpful there is QA tend to be a little bit more fleet of foot than we are, for all the reasons that we've already talked about. But it's then being able to point to the examples of, okay, we've done this and this has been the impact for the London campus. Let's see how we adopt it for main campus as well.
Thanks, Rob. And Donal, you talked about the kind of, just building on what Rob said, really, you talked about the visibility of data you have, for example, within the partnership. And obviously, like all of our partnerships, we have regular conversations around data and numbers, and we're jointly responding to things in sector. Could you maybe talk about that from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, you partner with a private provider for value add. We're not obviously, going back to the very first question, one of the first things you need to establish is there's no internal competition. Otherwise, what's the point? So there needs to be clear blue water between those entry points. But for us, it was very much around, Rob's touched upon, markets. I mean, you are active in markets that we have literally never set foot in. We've had applications, we've had enrollments from those particular markets. CIS, the stands, for example. We've had students from there. We've never done any work there at all. Morocco, you broke Morocco for USW. But that reach, I mean, there are universities out there who don't partner with a private provider, but you just can't get that reach on your own. I know there's other universities may have a different view, but just from my own experience, if you really want to take pathway pre-degree seriously, you need to be partnering with a private provider who has that reach. And there's quite a few out there, as you know. So really it was about, I mean, we've made the decision to focus on the undergrad pathway, as opposed to being a lot of bad press recently around our reliance on PGT. As a sector. So it's also a real benefit to have a partner where your sole focus is the undergrad. Of course, the students join us for either 2 or 3 years when they proceed. So it's win-win.
Thanks, Donal. And just to wrap up here, so we'll probably we'll finish here. But in terms of just going around the room here, if you could give anyone at the Boiler conference this week a piece of advice about establishing or managing a successful partnership, what would it be? So maybe we'll stay with you, Donal, just to finish off and go round. So
so absolutely, first choice should be QAHE, no doubt. I think the point I just made is a really valid one. You really, really think hard. If you're thinking about going alone in this sector, in this area of recruitment, it's really tough. You need to find a good partner to work with you, and just try and get as much sorted in advance of going live. That's really critical.
Thanks, Donal. Andrew?
I'd say, obviously, you get to contracting, you spend months and months going back and forth on contracting, and it's hugely important. It's the relationships that actually makes the partnership. You cannot have a true partnership with the contracts open on your laptop every time you have a conversation with what needs to go on. And I've seen that in other places, and it just doesn't work. You have to have that level of trust and that proper relationship, proper conversations. Absolutely, you have to have the structures around it. But you cannot rely just on having good governance structures around to make sure the partnership works. You've got to pick up the phone, you've got to do things together, you've got to be honest and open and transparent with each other at all times, and have that shared understanding, because it is a shared risk and it's a shared reward. but you need to be able and confident in each other and have the ability to talk in an open, transparent way. Otherwise, it will be a short-term partnership.
Thanks, Andrew. Very wise words. And Rob, definitely last but definitely not least.
Yeah, I think just to build on Donal and Andrew's points, I think from my perspective, it's giving yourself that time to think really clearly about what the problem is that you are trying to solve through bringing a private partner in. There are lots of private providers out there. And every private provider will have a different ethos, but also a different set of skills. And so it's then about making sure that that fit is there. And so in order to do that, you have to be really clear with institutionally about what it is you're trying to do, and then be really, really thorough in making sure that the things that you're trying to do are the things that your chosen private provider is there, has the skill set to do. And then over the top of that, you've got to, absolutely is about trust and personal relationships. But you've got to make sure it's getting off on the right start. Because like I said, there are lots of different solutions out there in the market, but you've got to be clear about what problem you have that you're looking for a solution for. So if it's about short-term numbers, that's one thing. If it's about long-term partnerships, that's something else. If it's about representation in a different part of the UK, that's something. If it's about pathway provision in a particular way, so it's just making sure that you're really clear and honest with yourself institutionally about what it is you're trying to achieve.
Thanks, Rob. Very helpful. And thank you everyone for your time. A lot of content there, and lots of useful advice for everyone to take to the conference. So have a great conference, everyone. Hope you enjoyed the session. Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Donal. Thanks, Andrew. And great. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.